Well, it's October, which means it's Halloween, which means it's time for horror movies. Now, I've been noticing a lot of people online have been making lists of the top horror movies of all time, or their list of recommended horror movies, but I thought I'd do a list of the 5 worst horror films I've ever seen. Let's start with number 5, which is the movie Totem, which, if you've seen my review, you know how bad this film is. Everything in the plot is forced, none of the plot makes sense, and all the main characters do is talk about the plot. There's not much violence, and the only villains are puppets and strobe lights. Number 4 is Cabin Fever, which unsuccessfully tries to be both a horror and a comedy. And if you've seen this movie, I'd like you to explain something to me. What the fuck is up with that kid who keeps on going on about pancakes and then breaks out into a kung fu scene? It's the most random, unexplainable scene in movie history. Number 3 is Wolf Creek, which is nothing more than women getting beaten and killed. Seriously, why are films like this and Hostel considered horror movies? They're exploitation movies. They're not scary, they're just gross. If this is what people consider horror films, then by that logic, The Passion of the Christ must be the greatest horror film of all time. Number 2 on my list of the worst horror films is House of the Dead, which is based off the popular Sega arcade shooter game. Now, the film was directed by Uwe Boll, who, as of this date, is right on track to becoming the worst director of all time. All of his films have been based on video games, and all of them have sucked, but House of the Dead is by far his worst. Why? 2 reasons. 1, he goes apeshit with the bullet time 360-degree turnaround shot, which looks shitty every time he does it, and in one of the worst marketing moves I've seen in any movie, it inserts actual gameplay footage into the movie. That's a new low in cinema. It wouldn't have been so bad if it translated in seamlessly, but it doesn't. It just looks so fucking amateur, like it was made by some fan of the video game. And the number 1 worst horror movie I've ever seen is Monster High. And that's right, I have a copy of it on VHS. I was originally going to save this tape for an episode of the VHS show, but this film is just too awful to talk about, so to ease the pain of having to watch this garbage again, I made a point-by-point breakdown of the movie's plot, so you won't have to watch it. A Jewish/Italian alien boss called Mr. John Doe notices that Earth has been postponed for destruction. Meanwhile, 2 retarded aliens called Gloom and Doom steal the ultimate weapon of destruction and bring it to Earth. The ultimate weapon is a basketball which unleashes Mr. Armageddon. Mr. Armageddon starts killing random students at a high school using these methods: laser eyes, fire from his mouth, rape, cano condom, turning kids into zombies, turning statues into horny monsters, bringing a mummy to life, making a computer monitor eat a nerd, turning said nerd into a robot that kills other nerds, marijuana monster, and a midget lizard that lives inside sneakers. The climax of the film involves the main character called Normedian challenging Mr. Armageddon to a basketball match for the fate of the Earth. Other highlights include an annoying opening song with lyrics, aliens constantly vaporizing humans, the female narrator describing characters based on sexual preference, basketball players who drive to school in limos, a baby being burnt by a cigar, a dog crushed to death by a box, a machine that blows up at the sight of tits, terrible 80s synth music, computer game involving a penis shooting at Bibles, anti-drug campaign mixed into dialogue, advanced sex ed classes, random earthquakes, scientists whose first thoughts are E=mc², censored sex scene presumably involving a donkey, Mr. Armageddon insisting on changing overtime to sudden death, basketball game tied at 66 for dumb wordplay joke, extended slow motion basketball shots, and the fakest zombie death I've ever seen in a movie. And there you have it, the 5 worst horror films I've ever seen. And I mean, oh sure, I've seen a lot of B horror movies where the budget was low and the acting was terrible and all the kills look fake and the blood looks fake, but you know, at least you can enjoy those films on the fact that they're so bad they're funny. But these horror films, they're not enjoyable on any level, and Cabin Fever and Monster High, 2 films that tried to be funny, aren't funny, and moreover, they're just grotesque. So when you go out to your local video store looking for horror films to watch on Halloween, avoid these films like the plague, unless you want your Halloween to suck balls. And if your local video store happens to carry VHS tapes, please remember my motto: please be kind and rewind.
Or else.